welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be making cinnamon rolls. If you'd like to see how this recipe is achieved, please stay tuned. So for this recipe, I'll be using Tasty recipe. If you don't know Tasty, you need to check them out. They're very good with recipes, easy recipes to make. So I'll be recreating this recipe from Tasty. So what I'll be using first, I'm going to be using milk, and I'm also going to be using plain flour. I'm also going to be using brown sugar, icing sugar, and I'm going to be using granulated sugar as well. I'm also going to be using yeast and cinnamon powder, and I'm also going to be using baking powder, salt, vanilla, unsalted butter, and I'm also going to be using soft cheese. So the first thing I'll be doing, I'm going to be pouring in my milk. You want to make sure you warm your milk a bit and you test it with your hand to make sure it's quite warm before using it. And I'm adding melted butter and sugar, and I'm just going to give this a good mix to make sure they're properly incorporated. And I will leave the list of the description of the ingredients and the measurements I use in the description box so you guys can see it. And now I'm just going to be adding my yeast. So I'm just drizzling it all over the milk, and I'm also going to be stirring it to make sure it's finely incorporated with the rest of the ingredients in the bowl. So after mixing this together, you want to make sure you put it in a warm place so that the yeast can grow and bloom. So you want to make sure you put it in a warm environment. So I kept it in a warm environment for 10 minutes. You could see the mixture and the yeast have already bloomed and grown. So I'm just adding my flour to it. I divided the flour into 2 bits, and I'm adding the first one. I'm still going to leave the description of ingredients I use in the description box. So I'm just adding my flour little by little, and I'm mixing it in, and I'm going to give this a good stir. If this is your first time visiting my channel, you're welcome. Please support me by subscribing to my channel, as I upload new recipes every week, and I'll be glad to have you in the Mocha's Meals family. Thank you. So you just want to give this a good mix and make sure to mix it well so that there won't be any lumps in the batter. So I just kept mixing it for about 2 to 3 minutes and giving it a good stir so there won't be any lumps, and it comes out looking really fine. You can see the lumps has been dissolved. I kept mixing this for a while. You can see how lovely it looks. You can see the consistency. It's quite light. That's the consistency you want to achieve. So I'm just going to set this aside, and I'm going to cover it. So now I'll be covering it with a foil, and I'm going to cover it for about 1 hour to make sure the batter double inside before I continue with the process. So I covered it with a tin foil, and I'm also going to be using a kitchen cloth to cover it and put it in a warm place for 1 hour. So while I'm doing that, I'm going to be making my cinnamon butter. So it consists of brown sugar, butter, and cinnamon, of course. So I'm just pouring the cinnamon little by little, and I'll be mixing the unsalted butter and the brown sugar together for a while. I want to make sure this is properly incorporated together. So that's why I'm putting the cinnamon a little bit at a time together with the butter and the brown sugar, and I'm giving it a good mix. So like I said, you want to continue mixing this properly and gently to make sure the ingredients is properly incorporated. The butter, the cinnamon, and the sugar is properly incorporated. And after doing this, you're going to set it aside because this is the filling for the cinnamon rolls. So the next thing I'll be doing, I'll be buttering my pan. So I'll be using 2 pans for this recipe, though I'm using half of the ingredients Tasty use, but I believe it's going to be a lot. So I'm just using 2 round pans, and I'm putting unsalted butter all over them. I'm using my brush to rub it to make sure it's properly incorporated in the pan before I proceed to the next phase of this recipe. So after buttering my pan, I'm just gonna check on the batter that I kept resting for about 1 hour. It has been resting for about 1 hour in a warm place, and you can see it has doubled in size. I just put my hand to show you guys the size. It has doubled in size. So I'm adding the remainder of the flour. I told you I divided my flour into 2 bits. I'm adding the remainder of the flour, baking powder as well, and I'm also going to be adding salt to this. And now I'm just going to give it a good mix and adding the flour a little bit at a time. I'm just going to give it a good mix. You can see the consistency of the batter has changed. It's looking a little bit thick now. So I'm just going to give this a good mix. If you're still watching and you've not subscribed to my channel, please support me by subscribing to my channel, as I upload new recipes every week, and I will be glad to have you in the Mocha's Meals family. So I'm just giving it a good mix, and now I'm just gonna pour it into my working table, and I'm just gonna be kneading this dough. So like they said in that video, you just want to knead this gently for about 10 minutes. I did mine for about 8 to 10 minutes. Just want to add a little bit of flour to your working table and keep kneading for as long as you can, about 10 minutes approximately. And if the batter gets sticky, you can add a little bit to your hands. You can see as I'm doing, it was sticky, add a little bit to my hands and to the working table, and I just kept rolling it for about 8 to 10 minutes like I said. So this is a continuous process. Just stay there and work on the batter. So after kneading it for about 8 to 10 minutes, you can see the consistency of the batter have changed. So I'm just going to use my hands to check, and if it does coming back when you press it, if it's coming back, you know the batter is good. So now I'll just be rolling it on my working table. So I'm using my hands to roll it into, fold it into a triangular shape. I'm just pushing it with my hands, the batter, and making sure I get a triangular shape before I use my rolling pin to roll it hard. So still add more flour to your working table, and now it has gotten to the shape I wanted. So I'm just using my rolling pin to roll it out, and now you can see I'm just making sure it comes out looking like a triangular shape. So I'm using my rolling stick to roll it into different sections and making sure it's not too thick. So you want to check the batter, you want to make sure it's not too thin, because mine was a little bit thick, so it's not too thin when you're rolling it out. Don't want to make sure it's too thin like you're doing meat pie or something. So I'm just using my spatula to fold the edges in, make sure it has a very good triangular shape, like a rectangular shape, sorry, like I said. So this is looking good for now, and I think this is perfect. So we can proceed to the next phase. So make sure you push it in again with your spatula or whatever you're using. I use a spatula, and this is perfect. So right now I'm just going to be adding the cinnamon and the brown sugar and the butter I mixed earlier on into the batter. That is how it's going to be cinnamon rolls, and I'm using my spatula to make sure it is incorporated into different sections of the batter. So you want to make sure it gets into different sections of the batter so that each roll can have the taste of the cinnamon in it. So you want to make sure you spread it very well. So I'm just giving it a good spread to make sure it goes to every bit and corner of this batter right now. So next thing we're going to be doing, we're going to roll the dough because it's a cinnamon roll. So I'm just rolling from my right, and I'm rolling it gently to make sure it folds well into a big roll. So I'm just pushing it gently from my right into a big roll, and it's looking good right now. So I just want to move it to the middle so you guys can see how this looks. It looks like a very thick long batter. So I'm just using my hands to extend it a bit, and I'm bringing back my pan because now I'll be cutting it and putting it in the pan. So I decided to use a knife. In the video you can either use a knife or use a dental floss, but I didn't have a dental floss, and I saw on the Tasties app that you can use a sewing thread. So I'm using the black sewing thread, and I'm just going to be cutting it with the sewing thread into the desired sizes I want, and this works very well. So if you don't have a dental floss, you can use the sewing thread. The sewing thread trick works very well. So I'm just going to be cutting it into different sizes as I want it to look like, the shape and the sizes I want it to be, and I'm just going to be putting it in my pan that is already buttered. So I went back and forth using the knife. You can see I'm using the knife again, and I'm also using the sewing threads. I was using both. I came back to the knife and I'm using it again, and the first one is done. You can see how they look good. So I'm just gonna do the second pan, and I'm gonna repeat the process. I'm still using the sewing thread here, and I'm also gonna be using the knife, so I'm just interchanging it. But sewing thread was better because it makes the batter not to compress into the ground, but with the knife it compresses the batter. But this one comes out looking good. You can see how it looks. So I'm just gonna use the knife to finish up because I just want to use the knife. So I just used it and I finished up the process. So now I'm just making sure each of the rolls fit into different sections of the pan and they're not tight. You want to make sure you give them some space so they can breathe, because we're going to be covering this for about 45 minutes to make sure they double in size. So these are how my cinnamon rolls looks like. I'm just going to be covering it with a kitchen cloth about 30 to 45 minutes, and I'm just leaving it in a warm place. And this part here, my working space is one place, so you can see it has doubled in size. Look at how those cinnamon rolls looks like. Trust me, they look lovely and they are already starting to smell amazing right now. So I took a picture. This is the before picture, and I'm just going to be showing you the after picture right now. This is the after picture, so you see how the changes occur. They have doubled in size. This is how the cinnamon rolls look like. They literally doubled in size. You can see how tight this looks. It wasn't as tight as it did before, so I'm just going to bake it. You want to make sure your oven is preheated before baking. So my oven is at 180 degrees and I'm just going to be baking the two at the same time. I know I'm just baking them at the same time, so I baked this for about 180 degrees for about 30 to 40 minutes. And now I'm just going to be making the icing for the cinnamon rolls. First I added my cream cheese, then melted butter. Now I'm adding vanilla, and I'm also going to be adding 2 tablespoons of milk, and I'm just going to give this a very good mix and make sure it's properly mixed. You want to make sure the cream cheese is very warm, like room temperature. Mine wasn't, so you can see it actually has some kind of lumps in it. So I'm just going to be adding my icing sugar a little bit at a time. So I kept adding the icing sugar and I kept stirring. Though my hands on fast forward, you want to stir as gently as you can and make sure the ingredients are properly incorporated together. So I kept stirring and I noticed that my icing sugar was looking too light, and I added about 2 tablespoons. I'm using half tablespoon here. I added about 2 tablespoons of icing sugar again to this mixture. I'm going to leave the description in the description box for you guys to see. And I just kept using a spatula or whisk. I just went back and forth to make sure this thing is quite smooth. So I'm adding the other tablespoon and I'm just going to give it a good mix to make sure the icing is quite smooth, not too runny, just the perfect consistency that I need for this cinnamon rolls. So after mixing it for a while, you want to check your consistency. If it's too light, you can add a cream cheese to it. So I added a little bit of cream cheese to it, and my consistency is looking very good right now. It's looking a bit thick and not too light as it was before, and the lumps have already gone because I gave this a very good mix for a long time. So I came and I checked my cinnamon rolls and they're looking good. The aroma is all over the kitchen and they're properly baked. So this is how my cinnamon roll looks like. Look at that, guys. It's so beautiful and it tastes yummy as well. So I'm just coming in for a closer look so you can see the cinnamon, the sugar, the brown sugar in the middle of the roll. You can see how good that looks like. It even tastes yummy. So now what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna remove them from the pan. Oh my days, even the back is looking good as well. It looks so good. So I'm just gonna be adding the icing sugar mixture I did, though my camera light was too bright here, but that's the icing sugar mixture I did. You can see it. So I'm just drizzling it all over the cinnamon rolls and I'm just using my spoon to rub it all over. Trust me guys, you need this icing for this. It's like the icing on the cake is very nice. So this is how cinnamon roll looks like. It's looking good and it tastes yummy. So I'm just gonna try it and show you how fluffy this looks like. Oh my days, look at this cinnamon rolls. And this is my first time baking cinnamon rolls. I love baking. I've not been dropping baking videos, but I promise I will do a lot of them very soon. And you can see how fluffy this looks like, and you can see the cinnamon in it tastes amazing. Thank you for watching.